let's get into the big story of the last 2 or 3 days. And when I say big, it's massive. As I said a minute ago, I do believe it may be the biggest story in all of sports right now, not just in college basketball, but in the entire sports landscape as we get set for the Super Bowl next week. Not a lot going on, and this just took the cake. It is, of course, the Kansas State brawl on Tuesday night, and kind of an insane backstory for your boy AT. I don't know how all you guys found out about it. I don't know if you were watching it live. I don't know if you caught up with it on social media, but it was kind of amazing. I was watching all the games. Kentucky was playing Georgia. Villanova was playing Butler. Who else was playing? LSU, Florida was a great game, and Kansas State was kind of a blowout. And so I kind of checked out on it right towards the end as it was finishing. I put on ESPN where Duke was playing, and then I started making dinner. My ladies at work decide I want to be a nice guy, decide to make some dinner, not really paying attention to the TV, and what happens? The brawl of the century, and I missed it by like 15 minutes. All I do is sit around and watch college basketball all day, every day to bring you the best podcast that I can. And the biggest storyline of the year happens, and I'm nowhere to be found. So it was incredible. Obviously, I caught up really, really quick with everything that happened. And I'm guessing if you're listening to this show, you know what happened. But for people, I don't even want to say for people who don't know, because you guys all know. But really quickly, it was the end of a Kansas State game on Tuesday night at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. Great rivalry. It's a great rivalry in most years. Kansas State actually won the Big 12 last year to break Kansas's streak. And at the end of the game, there's a kid, DeJuan Gordon, steals the ball. It's late. Kansas is up big. This kid probably kind of stupidly decides he either wants to pad his stats or he wants to make Kansas look bad in the final seconds. He goes up for a layup. Silvio De Sousa comes in and swats it. And Silvio De Sousa does what every young basketball player does that thinks they're in the NBA. He swats it, and then he steps right over him to kind of prove a point. Hey, don't be trying to put up a last-second layup in my house. Well, what happens? The kid doesn't take kindly to it. Some pushing and shoving happens, and all of a sudden an all-out brawl takes place. And when I talk about brawl, I'm talking WWE. Silvio De Sousa's grabbing chairs. David McCormack is curb stomping a guy. He's kicking a guy on the ground, or at least the video appeared to show that. His suspension wouldn't reflect that. And it just became an all-out brawl. Thankfully, coaches got in the mix, whatever, and it ended before it could escalate further. As best I can tell, there were no injuries. There were a lot of fans that were in the mix there. And so, thankfully, it got stopped before anything major happened. And so, this happens on Tuesday night. And my initial reaction is, dude, I got to do a podcast first thing. I got to get a podcast out. This is the biggest story in sports. A lot of you asked me, are you going to do an emergency podcast? And at the last second, I really did decide not to, because I really felt like I don't think that there was an interesting angle to have as soon as the fight happened, right? Like I turn on ESPN and I see all these broadcasters and everybody's trying to outrage each other. Everyone's trying to, he needs to be thrown out of school and he needs to be this and he needs to be that. And, for me in this business, I always try to bring kind of an interesting perspective. And I didn't really think that there was a very strong, interesting take to be had. I thought, look, these kids all screwed up. They looked really bad. They made their schools look bad. They made the Big 12 look bad. They made themselves look bad. They made their families look bad. That doesn't make them terrible people. That doesn't mean that they need to be shipped off to Siberia. It was just a bad incident all around. And so rather than doing the emergency podcast, I decided, you know what? Let me wait. Let me see what the suspensions are, and we will react from there. And so on late Wednesday, and it was late because I waited all freaking day to record this episode, the suspensions came down. The big one was Silvio De Sousa, the kid who kind of grabbed the chair. He got 12 games. David McCormack, also on Kansas, got 2 games. James Love from Kansas State, that was the kid in the black polo. If you've seen the video, and I'm sure you all have, the kid in the black polo from Kansas State, he got an 8-game suspension, and another kid from Kansas State named Antonio Gordon got a 3-game suspension. So that's the big news. The big headline is, of course, Silvio De Sousa gets the 12 games. And so to kind of backtrack to Tuesday night, it was kind of amazing for me. Like I said, everyone's trying to outrage each other. And it was kind of wild to see, everyone having such, vastly different opinions. Like I saw some people, I'm not going to name names, you probably follow them on social media. I saw some people going to one extreme of saying, oh, it's a fight, it happens, boys will be boys, like it's not that big of a deal. And like in the context of dudes throwing punches at each other, it really isn't a big deal. It happens in sports all the time, but the idea that they shouldn't be punished or they shouldn't be punished severely was preposterous, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you what makes the difference here, because I saw a lot of people say, well, there's fights all the time in baseball, and we love it, and there's fights all the time in hockey, and we love it. Well, you know what the difference was? This was not a fight between players that happened on the court in the field of play. This spilled into the stands where a paying customer could have gotten hurt. And it is amazing because every time that there's kind of a fan-player altercation, right? It happens in the NBA all the time. A fan touches a player, a fan shoves a player, a fan screams at a player. We always take the player's side. Well, they're on their place of work, and they shouldn't be harassed, and they shouldn't be touched. And like, I actually agree with that. Remember when Kyle Lowry fell into the stands in the finals last year in Golden State and the fan kind of shoved him, and we wanted the fan to be like suspended for the rest of his life? Well, it turned out he was a Golden State Warriors owner, so he wasn't going to get suspended. But like we came immediately to the defense of the player because the player fell into the stands and he got kind of shoved. Well, it's the same thing for the fans. You have to protect the fans. You cannot have players in the stands taking swings, potentially throwing chairs, kicking each other, whatever, when there are fans that are right there. Like I said off the top, thankfully everybody was okay. Thankfully nobody was hurt. But there were elderly people in that area. There were kids in that area. Can you imagine if one of those punches missed and hit a kid? Can you imagine if one of those punches hit an elderly person or just a regular paying customer? Could be a 30-year-old, whatever. The point remains, you can't have that. And so they did have to be suspended. But I also didn't think the other extreme was necessary either. I saw a lot of people say, well, Silvio De Sousa, who for people who have seen the video, he's the kid who grabs the chair over his head, WWE, and thankfully the Kansas assistant saw it and stopped him before he could do damage with it. I saw people, well, you got to throw him out of school. And I'm sitting there saying, like, come on, man. Listen, I get that it was a really bad incident. I get that, as I said off the top, it makes the school look bad. It makes the kid look bad. It makes the family look bad. It makes the whatever look bad. But it was the heat of competition. It was whatever. And I don't believe that as bad as it looked, I don't believe the answer to these kinds of things is to throw a kid out, to get rid of them, right? Like, I think part of the reason I love college sports in general, as you guys know listening to this show, is I believe that college serves a very important purpose for all these players, male and female, whether you're a high-profile basketball player or you're a nobody volleyball player. And that's what college does for all of us, which is to help turn you from a juvenile into an adult, from a kid into a man or woman. And so I don't believe that when a kid makes a mistake, as bad as that mistake was, that they should just be pushed out the door. I don't think that helps Silvio De Sousa. I don't think that helps his development. I don't think that's the mission of what college athletics should be. And I understand the mission's been skewed and there's so much money involved and there's all kinds of cheating in the FBI and blah, 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 and this and that. But I don't think that in the end it's going to do anybody good for Silvio De Sousa to be thrown out of school. Now, if there were other incidents, it would be different. If he was a threat to other students, it would be different. If there was other violent things in his past, it would be different. But there's no indication that this is who he is. He got caught up in the moment. And so I saw both sides. I didn't really agree with either, and I wanted to wait till the suspensions came out. And I'll say, I do think that the Big 12 got it right. I do think that Silvio De Sousa, I just think the kind of imagery of having a chair over your head and potentially being ready to swing it as a weapon, I don't think that can fly, and I don't think that can go unpunished. And so I do give credit to the Big 12 for finding that middle ground, for saying this behavior is so inappropriate. You cannot act like this. You cannot behave like this. You have to be better than this. You have to let cooler heads prevail, but also saying, we're not going to give up on you. Take the next month and a half off. Think about what you did. Think about what you would do differently next time. and make sure, come back a better person, come back a better man, and make sure that the next time that hey, by the way, maybe next time you block somebody, you don't step over them and leave your you-know-what in that person's face. Maybe the next time when that person shoves you, you walk away. And I'm not saying it would have been easy. I'm not saying that we haven't all been in fights. I've been in fights. It's not always easy to walk away. But I think that the Big 12 did what was right here. I don't think the answer to this situation was throwing the kid out of school, even suspending him for the year. This is the kid, Silvio De Sousa, of course, who was suspended for a whole year as it was because his guardian took money at Kansas. I didn't want to see his career be over. I don't want to see any kid fail. And again, by all accounts, he's not a bad kid. His guardian took money. He was suspended for it. He was punished for it. Bill Self still hasn't been punished for it. None of the adults have been punished for it. The kid was punished. And so I'm glad that he got back on the court. But when you make a mistake like this, there are real ramifications. I'm glad that that the Big 12 basically said, look, you screwed up. This was really bad. We absolutely cannot have this. But learn from this mistake, be better, and all that stuff. I will say the other suspensions, the one thing that really did surprise me, David McCormack, the other player involved from Kansas, only got 2 games. I don't know if I said it off the top. Sometimes I repeat myself, so I apologize if I do. But if you watch the video closely, the top right-hand corner, you see David McCormack kind of shoved to the side, and it appears as though he is kicking and stomping somebody on the ground who you would presume to be a Kansas State player. Maybe there's video. I've been told there's video that shows him not doing that. But from every piece of video I saw, that's exactly what it looks like. And so I'm stunned that this kid only got 2 games. I think, and I've said it, I think you can legitimately argue based on the video that I've seen, he was just as bad, if not worse than Silvio De Sousa. I thought he should have gotten more than 2 games, but he only got 2. And obviously the K-State kids, look, K-State from their perspective, the kid that threw the punches got 8 games. It's the right decision. The other kid got 2, whatever. But the big story, Silvio De Sousa getting suspended for 12 games. Going forward, I do think there's kind of 2 interesting things. The first one is, look, I think Kansas is going to be fine in the long term. Silvio De Sousa was a kid that was playing, he was playing, I think, like 3 minutes a game or something like that this season. They are going to be fine without him. The kid, David McCormack, would have been a big loss, but he's only going to be out for 2 games. For people who don't know, Kansas will host Texas in the Big 12 ACC Challenge, or the Big 12 SEC Challenge, later this year, or later this weekend. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read up on this really quick as we're talking. I do see that Seth Greenberg says that Silvio De Sousa should have been suspended for the whole season. I don't think that solves anything. I think it makes it likely that whatever. 12 games is plenty. 12 games is plenty. He will not be back now until the last game of the regular season on March 7th. So if you're telling me he's suspended for the whole year, he basically is suspended for the whole year. Give him about 2 months off. Let him think about what he did and let him come back. I have no problems with it. Anyone that's like going super hot take, it's funny. Everyone thinks I'm the hot take guy. I think I'm the most rational, reasonable person going sometimes. It's like, dude, I see both sides. Throwing him out on the street isn't the answer. Suspending him for the year, I don't think is the answer. 12 games is a lot of games. That's a third of the regular season that you just suspended him for. I have no problem with it, and I'll be fascinated to see what happens going forward. One last note. I just mentioned I think Kansas is going to be fine. I'll tell you this, though. It's another black eye for Bill Self. Another black eye for Bill Self. I'm beyond projecting. Is he actually going to leave? Is he not going to leave? What's the next step? All that stuff. Because we've been doing it for years. And for people who don't kind of know the background, Bill Self is best friends. He was a groomsman in the wedding of R.C. Buford, who is the San Antonio Spurs GM. There's been a lot of talk for a long time that when Greg Popovich retires, Bill Self will go to the NBA. He's been linked to the Bulls at various points. I don't know if it's ever going to happen. Bill Self is still pretty young where he would have to do it probably in the next 2 or 3 years to make it worth his time. But like I said, I'm done kind of projecting that. But I will say it is another black guy. And you think about all the things that have happened at Kansas really over the totality of his career, but even the stuff that he's got pinned for in the last year or so, you had a major rules violation where a player was paid by Adidas. Then you have the stripper situation with Snoop Dogg where they had, what did they call them? Something dancers. It wasn't exotic dancers. It was like whatever. You have that incident, and now you have this one. It's a bad look, and I don't know when people start saying, like, dude, enough is enough with Bill Self. Now, realistically, he's won so much there. I don't think anybody is going to force him out, but you do wonder if the school is just tired of one bad piece of publicity after another. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying to watch out, but in general, that's a conversation for another day. I think it's something to keep on the back burner. I don't think this means he's going to leave or he's on his way out or anything like that. What I do think it means, though, is that this is an insane story that gave us plenty of content for today. But in the end, I do think that the Big 12 got it right. 12 games feels about right for Silvio De Sousa. I don't think the answer was throwing him out of school. I don't think the answer was, shipping him out and just saying good riddance. I think college is about educating people. I think it's about helping people mature. And I would hope after everything he's been through, if he's ever going to mature, he will mature from this.